Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can jump in. I have a slideshow to go through, and then I'll open things up for discussion, hopefully get some feedback. And if there's, time at the end and people want to do like practice role plays for events or, dig into any of the topics that I cover, that's great. And, if we get through it all and want to wrap early, that's fine too. It'll be your meeting after we get through the slideshow. So let's begin. This is the citizen advocacy training. We're going to be talking tonight about tabling at events, and our goal with this training is to basically train volunteers to be effective advocates for the 4R Freedom Amendment through direct voter contact, meaning like one-on-one interactions at events like fairs, festivals, farmers markets, and along with a few other ideas too that we'll get into soon. So you can see here the topics that we'll touch on. We'll talk about how to get started, specifically how to identify the right event and how to schedule that event with the assistance of our organizers. Then we'll discuss the various materials that you'll need at your table. We'll talk about tabling tips and tricks, which is sort of like your messaging and communication practices and how to set up your table, things like that. How to follow up with people after the event to keep them engaged. And then I'll show you pictures from different events so you can get a sense of how you might set up a table for various types of events. Introducing Christopher Kerr, that is me. I know my title says Mike Mineta today, logged into his profile, but I'm in fact Christopher Kerr. I'm the National Field Director with American Promise. And I have my email and phone right there. And then, let me throw this into the chat too. This is a copy of the slides I wanted people to have because as you'll see, there's some information in here, some links that you might find helpful. So you can reference this, after the meeting, or you can follow along, but you'll find information in there that might be helpful. So what is tabling? Tabling is any opportunity to set up an American Promise table and speak to people face to face about American Promise and the amendment. So, this a lot of times I think when we think about tabling, people are thinking about like big events, like a fair, a 10-day fair or something where you have a big booth. But it could be something, really simple also. And, touch a little bit on that. But you can see here a few of the events that we would typically do for tabling. Of course, the big fairs and festivals are great. We do a lot of farmers markets, a few hours at a farmers market. We try to get onto college campuses and do voter registration drives and get people signed up with our citizen pledge. You might go to like a concert or a summer event that's just like a day long event, something that requires a little less investment than a big fair. Um, we'll look at conventions and not just political conventions. There are conventions of all sorts that we've attended. It could be a healthcare convention. The state of Maine does an opioid summit every year. There are women's conventions around the country that we've attended, social worker conventions, things along those lines. Anything political is as long as the two issues don't completely collide. So rallies might be good opportunities to consider. And then any public space with foot traffic, including even public sidewalks. When we're collecting petitions, we'll set up anywhere that has high foot traffic. It might be in front of a post office, as long as you're on a public sidewalk. We've had permission to table at transfer stations, town meetings, even just setting up in a public square. Maine has First Friday events that draw a big crowd in Portland. And then another great idea is local businesses. Oftentimes you can, with their permission, of course, set up a table in front of the business and talk to people as they're exiting. All right. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is like how to find the right event. And yeah, thanks, Marie. We had a little background noise there, so if folks aren't muted, please go ahead and do so. Let's see if I can. There we go. All right, so I think half the battle is finding the right event. I've been to, huge events where there are thousands of people walking by, but very few stop to engage, maybe because of the type of event or the, whatever the time of year perhaps. But I've also been to really small events that maybe didn't seem like the greatest opportunity at first, and turns out that you get a lot more engagement. So, first, when I think about scheduling an event, I want to know what are my goals for that event? Am I looking to connect with supporters and just do general education, or am I looking for people who are really committed and are going to be potential volunteers? So one rule of thumb is that if you live in a state that has already called for the amendment, and there are no federal members of and no members of Congress that we're currently pursuing for to sponsor the amendment, then your goal would be to conduct voter education just to keep people engaged with the issue. So in that case, you might look at the biggest events in the state to try to reach the most amount of people. But if you live in a state where there is no American Promise chapter, or you're working to build up your chapter and you need really strong volunteers, then you would want to look more at quality over quantity. So you'd want to find events that are a bit more targeted. And I'll talk a bit more about how to find those in a bit. You want to identify your capacity, and by that I mean how many volunteers can you sign up to help. These are long events. They're often 12-hour days, and sometimes over the span of 10 days. And you won't be able to do all of that by yourself. It's a huge task. So you've got to think about how many shifts you can fill and how much help you can get. The fairs do often require that you staff your table during the entire event, so it's an important thing to consider. And then location is important. If you're looking to advance legislation in your state, you'll want a table at an event in a priority district. So you might consider, if there's a specific member of Congress that you are, approaching to sponsor the For Freedom Amendment, or if you're working on a resolution in your state and there's a particular legislator that you need to get on board, you might hold the event in their district to get more voters from that area to sign on in support. And then also, we were talking about this a little earlier, is consider that events on your state's border could likely attract a lot of people from out of state, which may not be necessarily a bad thing. This is a national movement. So, if people from a surrounding state sign on in support, it certainly doesn't hurt our cause. But if you're working on specific state legislation, then you may find that events that draw more locals are better options. And if folks have questions as I'm going, please feel free to throw them into the chat. There will be a period for questions at the end, but by all means, toss them in the chat if you think of some, so you don't forget, and I'll try to address them as we go along. All right, so tips continued. The next thing that I do, not once I figure out, okay, am I looking for a targeted event or a big event? What area am I looking in? The next thing I do is go down a Google rabbit hole, and I just start searching all of the events I can look for in the state. Oftentimes newspapers will put out lists of the biggest or most the most anticipated events of the summer. You might find other websites or organizations do the same. So those are good things to reference. I might just search for biggest events in, I'm in Maine, so biggest events in Maine. I would look for political events in Maine, healthcare conventions in Maine, political conventions in Maine, anything that you could think of with a large group of people that might come together in the summer, and just do a bunch of various search variations to see what you can come up with. I've had luck at heritage festivals. I think specifically for this issue, they tend to have a little bit more of a cultural focus. You might find that it's a little less like rides and, not that there's anything wrong with those events, but they tend to, if the event is like a fair where there's a lot of vendors, games, rides, it may be more oriented towards like family fun and less like an educational kind of opportunity. So you may have a harder time engaging with people. But at events that are more focused on maybe an issue or a culture of some sort, those tend to have a bit more education involved. So you may find a more receptive crowd. Talked about farmers markets. So you should be able to find a list of all the farmers markets in your state. And with those, sometimes you need permission to actually table within the event itself, even if it's outside. But oftentimes you can set up at the entrance, or sometimes they'll let you even just set up a full booth in the event. So contacting the organizers is a good idea. Next, we've talked about rotaries and businesses. This is something that John McCree, our national business director, works on. But we found these events in Illinois where the Rotary Club actually puts on these big summer events. So that can be a good opportunity to table, and maybe you even make a connection with the Rotary, as one of our projects is presenting to Rotary groups. And then business events like mixers might have like a young professionals event, maybe like like a networking kind of event. And sometimes we can get into those events, or even just go with some maybe not even with a table, but just going around and talking to people and networking. This can be really effective. Talked about conventions. Social work is another one. We have a whole social work team. So if we have a convention, it's really easy to apply to get in there because we have established ourselves as a group that does education connected to social work. So that can be a good opportunity. And then any election related events, oftentimes around an election, there could be, either a post election event or something to build anticipation for the event. So those might be, opportunities to explore. So you've gone on Google now and found, what I like to do is keep a list of all the events that I'm considering. I put them in a spreadsheet. I even look at what's the attendance, when are the dates, how many people would I expect, and that information will help me make my final decision on which events I'm going to apply for. And then this one is maybe the most effective tool, and that's to ask around, to contact your network, and specifically political organizations or organizers, people who would have done this work before in your state. There are a lot of events that don't really show up readily on Google in Maine that I've attended that are some of the best tabling opportunities. So even if you go through an exhaustive Google search, you still may not find the best events for what you're particularly trying to do. And I think that, that personal recommendation is probably the strongest way to get the information you need to find the right event. Whoops, I may have, yeah, okay, here we go. All right, so next, once you've figured out which events you want to apply for, you have to fill out the application. The vendor applications should be readily available on the website. If you don't see them on the website, you can just send an email to the event organizers and they'll send you the vendor application. You'll want to maybe review the application before filling it out just to see what information they're requesting. Oftentimes, these vendor applications require event insurance, which American Promise can provide. So this is in case, anything were to happen, someone were to injure themselves at the event, we would be covered for any liability. So they'll ask that we have the insurance. Oftentimes there'll be a vendor fee, and this can vary considerably. It could be just a $20 fee for some of the big statewide state fairs. You might find that they're as much as like $2,000 for a week or 10 days. But it could end up being worth it. This is a conversation that we'll want to have together with American Promise organizers and chapter volunteers to figure out what makes sense. And then you can request funds through me or through the American Promise Action Center. We would put in a request and see if we can get the event approved, and then we can pay for the vendor fee. Now, we're a national organization, but a lot of state events prioritize local vendors. And if you have an American Promise chapter in your state, you really are local. So it's best to apply with a local address. They'll prioritize applications from folks in the state. So if we're going to do an event, you'll probably want to be the person submitting the actual application, but we can help you fill in the information. Always good to know the logistics before you fill out the application to figure out, like we talked about, whether you can staff the event, which materials you'll need. And sometimes it's hard to find that information again once you send in the application. So just maybe take some notes. Is the event indoors or outdoors? Do they provide a table and chair? How big is the booth space? Is it typically, they might be 10 feet by 10 feet, which is the size of one of those pop-up tents. And so, knowing, do you need a tent for this kind of thing? That's important information. And then finalizing the application. This is done with an American Promise organizer, especially if it requires any of this information. So feel free to reach out to me at any point, and I'm happy to help complete those applications with you. Then the next thing I would do is put together a team. I like to use Google Sheets for this. I create what basically something like you see right here, where it shows the day, the shift times. I like to do 3-hour shifts. Some people prefer scheduling people for 2 hours. I find that it becomes hard to fill a day with only 2-hour shifts. So I do 3. It breaks a 12-hour day up nicely into 4 shifts. But sometimes it varies. I might do 4. It depends on the event and the people that are engaged at that time. And then I'll shade in the days where I need, how many shifts I need. So all the yellow would be places where people would add their names. You can see at the peak hours on Saturday, I've added a 3rd shift. But you might even only need 1 person for the first day on Friday, 3 people during the peak, maybe 2 people otherwise. The time goes better with 2 people. I find, if you can at least have 2 people at a table, it's good. And I'll talk a little bit in the tips and tricks section about why that's important. And okay, yeah. Is anyone else, just reading the comments, is anyone else having an issue hearing, or looks like we're good? Okay. Yeah, sorry, Peggy. If it continues to be a problem, we will have a recording that I'll send around afterwards. So yeah, this is just a simple form. I can help you set one up if you have an event in your state, but it can help you make sure that every shift is going to be covered, and it can help, be an easy tool where people can just go in themselves and add their name to whatever shifts they're able to cover. This is a list of the supplies that we have for tabling, and we've just compiled 5 tabling kits that include all of these supplies. We're going to have a variety of different kits. So we might have a kit for smaller events like a farmer's market, and then a kit for a bigger event like a 7-day fair. But this is like the full kit if we were going to go to a big event. I'll just read through them quickly. We have a variety of different handouts, some of which we're still finalizing. So we'll have new branded handouts for all of the events this summer. The prize wheel, which you'll see pictures of soon, which has been a great addition. I think maybe the idea came from Nancy originally. So thank you for that. It's been a big hit. And then the various prizes. We have some that are just fun things that, a kid would like, or, some of them even adults, like the little Rubik's cubes are a fun toy to include as handouts. But then anything that's, we have things that are AP branded, like shirts, hats, pocket constitutions, notepads, stickers, pins, pens, and fans. And we put all those on the prize wheel so people can win various things. We like to have a few American flags on holders. One of the tips is that I would suggest is if you have a big event, you want to build it up. You don't want your table to be flat. You want people to be able to see some things as they're walking up. It helps to give the presence of something bigger, something more flashy, and it helps draw people in. So having like the plastic sign holders that you can put a sign in is great. You can maybe have people read the text of the amendment. You might have like the prize wheel in the middle of the table that adds some height and some color to the table. And then the American flags are a nice touch that matches our branding, matches what we're trying to do, and gives it a nice design to the table. The amend mints have been a big hit. These are just breath mints, but a sign that says amend mints. It's a little funny pun, and people get a kick out of it. So that's just the amendments, the sign, and a basket. We have a banner, and we also have a table runner. The table runner goes over the front of the table. I'll show you some pictures in just a minute, and the banner goes behind you. We have various props so that you can do a photo booth, which I'll show you also in a moment. And these are the various props that we might have there for people to put on and hold up as they take pictures. I always like to keep, especially at this hot summer events, is a big jug of water or like lemonade and some cups, because they do, these summer events in parts of the state get very hot. People get, exhausted, dehydrated, and it gives them an opportunity to come up to the table and stop for a moment, which gives you sort of an opportunity to engage. Also like doing candy too. Kids love candy. If the kids are happy, the parents stay at the table longer. So have a little treat for people is a helpful tool. And then little things you might not think to bring, but are super important. You want to make sure you have tape. And I would suggest using, for a big event, having painter's tape and something stronger like duct tape. If you need to hold up the banner or do something that is a bit heftier, the painter's tape just won't cut it. You'll want to make sure you have markers in case you want to make a sign, pens, plenty of pens so people can sign on to the citizen pledge. This one is one that a lot of people would forget. It's paperweights, or you could even scavenge rocks while you're there. But if your event's outside, as soon as that first gust of wind comes through, all of your handouts will go flying. So you want to make sure those are covered up. You may need a table, chairs, and a canopy. And those are things that we can't ship because of the cost of shipping, but something that we can work with you on acquiring. And I think I mentioned the rest of these. We have a tablecloth that matches the runner, and then clipboards and a tripod. On the tripod, we usually keep a big poster that has the text of the citizen pledge, and that's also something that we'll include in the packets. And for folks who joined, as I was already speaking, if you have questions as I go, type them in the chat. If that's helpful, you can hold on to them also, because we will do a Q&A at the end. But if you throw them in the chat, I'll try to address them as we go. So then there are two things that I like to include at the tables: tabling actions and tabling activities. The tabling actions are things that we're asking people to do. And depending on where your state is at or what projects you're working on, this could vary. The basic one that we ask people is to sign our citizen pledge. It works at just about any event. It helps get people into the pipeline to be contacted about being more involved, and it gives people an opportunity to even just sign up to volunteer right away. So we can do a QR code we have a QR code on our literature. We can do a QR code in a plastic sign holder, and or tape them onto the table so people can scan it. That is the easiest way, because then you get everybody's information. You don't have to enter it at the end, and sometimes deciphering people's handwriting is really challenging. So getting all of the information directly is very useful, but we definitely don't rule out using paper form, which I'll show you in the next slide. But depending on where your state is at, you might want to include other actions as well. We're acquiring an advocacy tool that will make it very easy to send letters to your legislators. So we could do letter writing campaigns for legislation. We can do actual physical postcards, which can be very powerful. You might have like a specific event that you're promoting, and in that case, one of your actions might be to RSV people for that specific event. So depending on what you have going on, you might include, a few things. You don't want to have so many things that it overwhelms people, but having, 2 or maybe even 3 options that people can do to take action can be really effective. And then this is just the basic multi-signer citizen pledge. This is what we keep at the table. It's got about I think 12 lines there, 11 or 12 lines per sheet. You write the event date and location and the event name at the bottom, so we know where the signatures came from, and then collect people's information. One thing I would suggest if you're using this paper sheet is to put either your information in the first line or do a fake name and include every bit of information. Do your first and last name, a full address, including zip code, your phone number, and an email address, and check the box to volunteer. And there's some sort of psychological effect that I notice very clearly out in the field, which is people will just write the information that the person before them wrote. So if the first person only writes their name and email address and doesn't give us an address and phone number, the following people are likely to do the exact same thing. Whereas the first person provides their full information, the next people will provide that as well. And of course, this information stays within our system. We're very protective of that information, so no one has to worry about their information being sold or shared with outside organizations. But it is really important to have the address so we can match them to their political district and their legislators, and the phone number so that we can get in touch when there are urgent actions to take. And then tabling activities, and these are the fun things, and we talked about this. This is the prize wheel, so it's a nice colorful addition. It's fun. It's just just spinning the thing is kind of exciting. And then the anticipation, am I going to win a shirt or a hat, or am I going to win like a pen that I could have just walked off with anyway? So it can be, it definitely is fun. It gets people engaged. Sometimes, if you're having like a serious conversation with someone, they're not going to want to spin the wheel. They were just there for information. That's fine too. But it definitely gives it a more positive feeling at the table, and you can have a little fun with it. And these again are the prizes that we give out. We also have like bouncy balls. There are a few just items that don't really have anything to do with American Promise. They're just colorful, fun little items. And then the majority of the stuff is American Promise branded. And then like the pocket constitutions, which are actually educational. And then this is the photo booth I was talking about. You can see we had a lot of fun with it in Arizona. We had bags of money, these fake, money bags, and then just this movie prop cash. We had different hats. We also had like a Statue of Liberty set up there. They had the trichome hat, the giant top hat, and people would, the barrels in the background are a nice touch. So people would want to come up and have their picture taken, just having some fun. And it actually did get a lot of engagement. So and it was just gave it a great fun twist. So that's an option. We have this in it also to share with folks in the packages. All right, so the last, I think, so this is, I think, the last major section I wanted to cover before I open it up. There's one smaller section afterwards, but we'll open up for conversation and questions in just a bit. But I wanted to go over tabling tips and tricks. I think these little things can actually make a huge difference in how the interactions go at the table. So a few things that I would recommend is if you have multiple people, have at least one person standing in front of the table and one person standing in back of the table. And the person in front of the table should be the more extroverted person who really doesn't mind just jumping out and talking to people. And that helps to bring people into the table. And then having a person at the back of the table that you can kind of direct them to. So the person in front is like the person who stops the individual, introduces them to the issue maybe in the organization, and then maybe brings them over to the table to show them what, some of our literature, the prize wheel. And at that point, the person in back can take over the conversation, or they can switch places, and the person who was in back can then go out and try to get more people into the table. So, having that balance can allow you to have more conversations. When you are in front of the table, the first impression is really important. So what I do is I will just I'll stay sort of focused on the crowd as people are walking by, and I'll try to catch someone's eye. And that gives me a good opportunity to give them just a smile and a wave. and a warm hello. And that allows me to bring more people into the table. If you just wait at the table for people to come up and ask you what you're doing, what the organization is about, you're going to lose 75% of the people that you could be talking to. Some events do have some limitations here. You can't be like out in the middle of the hallway trying to grab people and drag them to your table, or screaming, or you can't be just aggressively trying to pull people into your table. I wouldn't expect this group to be like that, so it's no worries. But just keep that in mind. You'll find that information in the vendor application oftentimes, or there's sometimes at the bigger events, there's someone who monitors your area, and they'll just come around and give you like the general rules right up front. And those are always people to maintain good relationships with, because they can determine whether you come back the following year. Speak conversationally and listen carefully. I think when I'm at these events, a lot, like some of the best volunteers that I connect with are people who didn't really ask a lot about the issue itself. Like, we just ended up having a really good conversation and making a good connection. And that kind of human connection really helps people to feel comfortable coming into an organization or getting more involved. So, while what we are saying is very important, sometimes, the connection you make with someone, the body language, it can make a big difference also. This is a really important one. We really got to focus on our mission, and there are several reasons for this. One of which is that as the organization that we are, this is all we do, right? We are solely focused on one issue, and that is the 4R Freedom Amendment. So we don't want to go off on promoting, I should say, other types of reform. But even more important is like, stay away from hot button issues, because you never know what someone's political affiliation is. I've stepped in it a few times, and it's not, you think someone is going to support something that you support, and you bring it up and they go silent. And you can tell right away, okay, this is not something that this issue, it was clearly a hot button issue for this person. So focus on money in politics. I would say the only caveat is, if you ask someone, like, what issues do you care about? Then you can engage with them on those issues. And if you are going to talk about them, what I would suggest is trying to show them how money in politics affects that particular issue. And that's, we're fortunate that, unfortunate and fortunate that this issue ties in so closely to so many other issues. So that's something that with a little practice we can do fairly easily. Be yourself, be comfortable. This kind of, I guess I already touched on this. So the next one is be respectful, kind, and patient. And I say this not because I'm worried about you, but because sometimes you get someone up at the table who is just kind of rude or really negative or aggressive. It's pretty rare, but it does happen occasionally. And if that is the case, we don't want to try to escalate the issue at all. We just want to, say thank you so much, and allow them to move on. Or if they're being really in your face and aggressive, you can even just ask them to move on, thank them for stopping by. But clearly we can't see eye to eye, so let's just agree to disagree, that kind of thing. Instead of just trying to fire back or feel like you have to get the last word in, because that's just going to get people aggressive. And then oftentimes, if there are some of these events where if you're there late at night, people have been drinking, so just don't throw gas on the fire, I would say. This one I think is really important. We practiced with whoops, my notes don't match up. Okay, so on the sheet, okay, monitor the sign-up sheet. I talked about this a little bit. If you're doing the paper sheets, you just want to sort of watch as people fill out in case their handwriting isn't legible. I mean, you don't want to hang over their shoulder so they're uncomfortable, but before they leave, maybe just check their handwriting. If they didn't give information and you feel comfortable saying, hey, I noticed you didn't leave your email address. We don't send you a lot of emails. You can always unsubscribe, but to stay up to speed with what we're doing, you might want to consider including an email. So, just checking that sheet before they head off can be helpful to get a little bit more information or to clarify some handwriting that might be hard to read. And then also touched on this, keep a cold like jug of water or some candy or even coloring books at the table. Helps to keep kids at the table. It helps, keep other people, the drinks especially help to keep just about anyone at the table at a hot event. And most places are charging for this stuff. Like a lot of times it's hard to even find a cup of water that you don't have to pay for. So people will be relieved that someone's just offering them something cold to drink. And then I think we could probably spend the rest of the time basically talking about messaging, which, happy to get into after we wrap things up here a little bit more in detail. But I would suggest everyone review our messaging documents. I will, let me see if I can throw the link to the, yeah, here's the link to the slideshow that I'm going through. So you have these links. Here we go. These are, good documents to review. We have more documents also that I'm happy to share with you. The website is full of information, so that's a good place to look. And then we're working on this frequently asked questions document, which I think will be a very useful tool for these types of events. And this is a first draft. It's still usable, but we'll have a branded second draft coming out soon. And then before your event, I would encourage you to schedule a 30-minute call with me or Mike to practice if you feel at all uncomfortable about going out and having lots of conversations with people. You can use that link right there to schedule a 30-minute call with me. You can always email me or call as well, and I'd be happy to get you on the calendar to do a one-on-one or group practice to make sure you feel comfortable heading into the event. All right, and then finding a good opening line. So a lot of times when you're at these events, there are hundreds of people. They move by very quickly, and sometimes you only have 3 to 5 seconds to really hold someone's attention before they're moving on. So we've really tried to refine some good opening lines, and I find that maybe having a few to cycle through is helpful. But once you find one that really works, sticking with that also helps to build confidence that you're bringing people into the issue. So here are a few that we've been using, just keeping it really simple. Do you want to stop billionaires from buying elections? Do you want to help us stop corruption in government? And do you want to learn how we can get big money out of politics? And I've really been liking that last one. If anyone else has suggestions, I'd love to see them. So feel free to throw them in the chat, just little, one sentence stoppers that get people to go, okay, I'm sort of interested in what else you have to say. And then this is just like a general guide of how I would navigate a conversation. Of course, every conversation is different. It might take you in different directions, but just generally, I'm going to use an opening line. First, I'm going to try to catch their eye, smile and wave. Hey, how you doing? Do you want to stop billionaires from buying elections? Or do you want to learn more about how we can get big money out of politics? Then you want to introduce the organization. I always like to say that we're nonpartisan and nonprofit. People often get turned off by political, political causes that they feel may be opposed to their political beliefs. So letting them know right up front that we're nonpartisan is really helpful. Then I like to ask a question. Anytime you can get people engaged right away, you're gonna have a much better conversation. So I like to start with questions like, do you think you have an equal say in government compared to big campaign spenders? Or do you think there's too much money in our political system? And those can often spark, good conversations from that. Then I outline the problem, talk about big money, dark money, and now foreign money dominating our elections, how this fuels division, how it's silencing the American people, and it stalls progress on the many issues that we face as a nation. And then talk about the solution, the 4R Freedom Amendment, and don't forget to tell them what they can do about it. So now that they know about this big problem, they know that there's a solution and why we need to pass this amendment, then we want to get them engaged in the work that we're doing. Oops. Okay, and I've taken some pictures of various events that we've attended so you can see the different types of tables that you might set up for various events. This is going to be like a bigger fair. You can see there's stuff, there's a drawing, so that's like an activity, a fun activity for people. There's some red, white, and blue, colorful props on the table, helping to build it up. There's this plastic scan sheet on the right, and then you can see it like the paper fans, some notepads. They have their clipboards right up front so people can sign on. They've got the banner in the background. So this is going to be like a full kit and a full table that you do at a weekend event or a 7-day event, something along those lines.
I'm sorry, Chris, a quick question.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the previous slide? What
Yep.
was the free drawing? How did that work?
So the drawing was for a flag, and I believe it had been flown over the state capitol, and they were collecting people's information and then drawing the flag. I don't know if Marie remembers more information about but I think
is this Vicky's was this Vicky's table? Yeah, they through, I think it was maybe through her congressman's office, they had gotten a flag that had been flown over the state, over the Capitol, over the U.S. Capitol.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yep, and this was at in Arizona at our Freedom is Brewing. You can see we have all the props on the table. It looks a little busy, it's a little more I don't know, busy, I guess, but there's a lot more stuff on that table than you would have at something that's a little more maybe professional, like a professional business event or a convention. This one was just 2 weekends ago. Cheryl and Esther in Illinois went and tabled at a Rotary Fest, and that was their first tabling experience, and they did great. It was so exciting. I was very excited for them. But you got the setup here with the table runner and a few of the props out there. They only have materials just for a few hours, so a typical fair might have a little bit more on the table. And then the next two are from conventions. This is from a political convention. You can see the table's a lot simpler. There's more information on the table, less props and prizes. We do include the shirts and hats there for folks. Same thing with this. This was at a convention, just a little more straightforward, a little less flashy. And then it could be something as simple as this. So we talked earlier, like I've had some of the best success tabling in front of a post office, believe it or not. Now you can't do it on the property. That's federal property. They don't like that. But if there's a public sidewalk in front, you can set up just a very simple table with the citizen pledge and a sign, a little 8.5 by 11 sign, and get a bunch of pledges in one day without doing all of the work necessary to plan for a huge event. And similar here, the picture on the left is from a farmer's market. Very simple 4-foot table, one sign and a sign-up sheet. The one on the right is a college event. We did some volunteer recruitment at a college. Again, just really simple because it's just in a little hallway outside the classroom. Probably could have done a little bit more for the college event, but it doesn't have to be anything too flashy. And then finally is the follow-up. Now, if you're just sort of in one person in a state or you don't have an established chapter, this may be left to American Promise. We can upload the data and make sure we get in touch with anyone who signed the pledge or signed up to volunteer. But especially if you're part of a state chapter and a team, this may be something you want to do to build relationships with your new prospects. So if that is the case, you would share photos with us so we can get them into our database, pictures of the sign-in sheets, so we can get them in the database right away and get them into our email series. But then we'd want to contact them directly and ideally within the first 2 days. So anyone who signs up to volunteer should get just a phone call thanking them for coming to the table and inviting them to your next meeting. And then you want to log your progress in the Action Center so that we can have a report at the end of the year of all the progress that we've made. And I think that's it. So let's open it up for questions or comments.
Chris, this is Nancy. Since we're going down to Augusta in 2 weeks, Augusta County Fair, which is, I'm in Virginia, so it's about 2.5, 3 hours south. So it's a good area. We selected it because there's a Republican representative who is in the Problem Solver Caucus. So the idea is to get enough people who are willing to sign up and then tell them, we'd really like to organize a meeting with your representative. We hope you would participate and try to, apart from just putting the information in. But we're also, since Virginia is going through a big election, going to try to get, because there are always candidates there who are at the fair, so try to get them to sign the American Pledge. So we'll have
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and I actually have, I made a big poster with, unfortunately, there are a lot of Democrats, but what does a pledge look like? I signed the pledge or something so that they can see what it looks like.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something I meant to say earlier, but I must have skipped over, is when you're looking for events, if you're not sure about whether it is a good event to attend, I would recommend pulling the vendor list from previous years to see if other political or nonprofit organizations attend. If the Democrats and Republicans do a lot of events, and if they're not even at the event, it still may be an opportunity, but it's likely that it's not, like they've been doing this year after year. They're going to have a lot more knowledge about the events. So it's pretty good, a good likelihood that if they're tabling there, it's probably a good opportunity. And then, like you're saying, if they are, then they're going to have candidates staffing the booth all week, and you can go up to the various candidates. So I love that idea. And we do have paper candidate pledges and the form. So if that's something people want to include, it won't come in the tabling kit. Well, maybe I'll pitch it to Mike, but as of right now, they don't include it.
Yeah, I have some. Also a question, because our fair, it's like 4:30 to 9, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's longer. And then Saturday, it's all day. So we got some people who are coming, John McRae, a couple other people. One guy, I was talking to him today on the phone. I don't know him. He lives down in that area. And he said, oh, do you want me to volunteer? And I said, oh, that would be great. It would be so great to have you come down there. We'd love to meet you. But what the challenge is, he's not going to be trained or anything to talk to people. So how do you integrate him into that? I mean, the other people, I'll share your slides with them. We'll have a discussion, and they're pretty savvy. They know American Promise. They know money and politics. But when you have people who are saying, oh, I'll stop by and help, it's sort of, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's actually a great opportunity to get new volunteers if you have people at the table who are experienced, because they can even just sit back and watch and gain a lot of knowledge just from being there. If I'm going to have someone staff a table and they are going to be there by themselves, or they're going to be there with someone else who is new, I really like to do training ahead of time. And anytime you can do in person, that's the best. And that's when, like, a farmer's market or a day in front of the post office might be really effective, because you could go out for 2 hours and train someone and pack everything up, and they'd have the skills they need to go out and do a bigger event. But if in person isn't an option and they are someone who can pick this stuff up fairly quickly, you can do digital. That's what we did with the Illinois team. They had one person who didn't feel comfortable really doing it, and but wanted to do something, and then another person who was like a mid-level of comfortable, and they had been with us a bit longer. And so we did a full 1 hour training, and then a second call right before the event to answer any last second questions. And they felt really comfortable at that point. So yeah, I would say, getting new people there, if you're there or John McCree's there, that's going to be a really solid opportunity to train them. And then if they don't work out, they're at a fair and they can just go walk around and do whatever if it's something they're just not interested in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make it so I don't have to be there for all 5 days.
Yeah, and that's tough. With someone who's brand new, unless you get on a couple calls with them, I wouldn't just sit them at the table. If you are going to schedule them for like the first shift on like the first day if you can, not like the peak hours, because those slow shifts can be really slow.
And then you have time to talk.
Yeah, that's
Hey,
good.
hey, Nancy, I would suggest to you, especially because you want to approach the congressman on the problem solvers, is maybe we did this on an informal basis. We called it a penny poll, but actually at MWEG, when I went to the MWEG conference, I didn't do it for American Promise, but MWEG did it for the conference attendees. They did sort of a poll. Which of these issues bother you most? And they were just talking about for their activities, but you could do a selection maybe that you would think would definitely cover for that area of the state. Is it fossil fuels? Is it gun violence? Is it military industrial complex? Is it, climate change? And have people put, give them like red dot, make a big poster and give them like red dots and yellow dots, or even all the same color dot, but just have them stick the dots in the category, and then you can say, hey, we did an informal poll at this
Wow.
fair, and these are what people responded with. Your constituents are really concerned about money and politics effects on these various
Well,
issues.
but then how do you have to have a stand to put like a poster board, right? Or something,
You can put it on a tripod.
tripod.
Mhm.
It's part of the kit we sent too. You could do it in instead of the citizen pledge poster. You could just include that somewhere else.
Oh, that's a great idea, Marie.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Things that are visual tend to draw people in.
Yeah.
So how do you do it? You have it like the categories. We do have a little flyer that we have. Why should you care about money and politics? It's failing health, spiraling drug prices, elder care, Virginia energy policies. Do you give them a different color sticker?
You could, but you probably just want to do it, like, make it as easy as possible for yourselves to, like, just clearly mark, like, pick 4 or 5 different topics that you think are going to cover most people, and then just give them, it doesn't matter what color the sticker is, it matters what
Where
column
they
they
are.
put the sticker in. Because presumably if you're going to have 4 or 5 days, you're going to have, several of these that you're going to produce, and then you're just going to have to count up how many you have,
That's
in each one.
It's interesting though. This is in Southwest Virginia, so I don't think we'd want to put anything like on guns or abortion because it's a more conservative
No,
state.
but they're just dealing with the whole thing with the pipeline going through there, right? So fossil
Right.
fuel
Yeah.
companies are probably one of the big ones. Yeah. And the
Yeah.
other thing, Chris, it came up when you were talking earlier, and then you had suggested about the opening line of, what do you think about billionaires buying our elections? I think we had talked on one of our leader meetings about that Uncle Sam hat. If you had that Uncle Sam hat and you walked up to somebody, they're already looking at you because you got the Uncle Sam hat on, right? You don't have to catch their eye. And then you say, hey, I'm a billionaire. I want to buy your election. What do you think? Want to sell it?
With the money bags. With the money bag.
Yeah.
I love
And the monocle.
Absolutely. Yeah. Politics can be a tough issue to talk about. So anytime that we can like alleviate that and add a little humor, I think is great. Amy.
So I feel comfortable talking about my first, like, how do you feel about billionaires wanting to buy your, the election? What I feel a little more like, and I'll probably learn from Howard because he's in Wisconsin with me. When people start asking specifics about, before our Freedom Amendment and what is that going to do and how does it work, and kind of really more specific questions about that. And that's where I'm still learning how to answer those questions.
Yeah. So I'm going to drop
answering.
This is the frequently asked questions document that I just threw it in the chat, and I'll send this slides around again tomorrow with the recording. But this goes through like, what is the problem? What is the solution? Why do we need an amendment? How much progress has been made? How do we get our funding? All those kind of tough questions you might get out in the field that and they may have a hard time answering at first. We're going to include one of these sheets in every packet, but a good thing to review ahead of time. And then again, please feel free at any point, whether it's the whole group of Wisconsin or even individuals who want to schedule a meeting, I have this Calendly link, and it's really simple. You just pick a time that works for you, and it lands on my calendar, and then we can meet digitally and do practice or go over various documents. So happy to dig in more about the messaging stuff.
Hey,
And
Chris, you can always add in that, Ann and I are doing the intro to Money in Politics, where we definitely go through,
oh, that is great.
it's like 20 minutes long. We definitely go through all of the underpinnings, why the constitutional amendment, what the amendment says, and the basics of, if you, I don't know if the timing would work out for when you're going to be doing your fair. The 14th, the afternoon of the 14th, is one Friday the 14th, and I think the next one is the last Wednesday night of July.
What time on Friday? What time on Friday the 14th?
12 p.m. Eastern time.
12 Eastern, yeah.
12 Eastern, so maybe 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in. And the link is on.
The link. Okay.
Yep, the link is at the events page, but there's also a recording available now too on Band, and I think we can link that in here. And that is a great slideshow. They worked really hard on it, and it's very thorough, and that's a great tool to help improve messaging. Susan.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to what Nancy brought up about a new volunteer who I wouldn't leave at a table by themselves, but it's great. You have so many jobs you can give them. They can be the person that spins the wheel, in charge of spinning the wheel or monitoring the sign up sheet. And, then they have something to do. They feel like their time is important. Their being there is important. And all the time they're listening to you talk with other people, so that maybe in a subsequent day, they could be there by themselves.
Yep. Yeah, giving some ways to be engaged is a great idea. We definitely want people to leave feeling like this is worthy use of their time and they contributed. And even if they don't feel comfortable being the person out talking to people, answering all the questions, there are still meaningful ways that they can contribute. Thank you for that.
And I think in your areas are all different, like Wisconsin and West Salem is going to be a lot different. So we can practice, but I think not until you're out there, that's where I think you can observe how people are answering the questions and the type of people that are coming up to your booth. And so I hope I can learn from Howard.
Howard, how are you feeling?
I feel fine. I've never done tabling either, but I've been at enough events now, and most of it you learn by listening to Chris and Alan and all the other people, and that's the best way, and all the reading that you've done over time. But yeah, we'll go to whatever we do the first one. I think it's like a cram course. I've done lots and lots of trade shows over the years. And you start out, and the first day is a little ragged, but it doesn't take long. One day of under the gun and answering questions and talking, you get your shtick down, as they say back east, and it just rolls after that. And so it'll be fine.
Exactly, and yeah, you nailed it. And I told one of the volunteers in Illinois who was a little nervous about going out, and it's absolutely true. So you never get all the tough questions you think you're going to get in anticipation. It's oftentimes just much more casual conversation. You'll get a few people who are just really like into this issue and they will want to maybe dig in with you. But, just even, reviewing the frequently asked questions document or some of these, 1 or 2 page documents and getting the rough idea of what we're trying to accomplish is a good start. And then once you're digging in with people, you'll oftentimes be, like you're saying, hearing people answering the questions or just through digging in yourself. And it's always okay to just say, hey, I actually don't know. It's a great question, but I'm happy to take your information and give you the answer. Or, you're welcome to check out the website and find more information there. Well, we're at our time. If there's anyone who wanted to stay on with more questions, I'm happy to, but I wanted to give folks the opportunity to head out without dragging things on. And I wanted to thank y'all for coming and asking great questions. I'll send around an email in the morning with the link to the recording so that y'all can have that. And And please, again, feel free to reach out at any point and schedule one-on-one, or if you have any questions, just reach out and be happy to help.